And welcome. Today we're taking apart an HP 15-DK0055nr. This is a 15-inch HP Pavilion gaming laptop with the GeForce GTX 1050. So any 15-DK model should be similar or the same as this. And just be advised, we're going to be leaving the display assembly complete. But just like most displays, you separate the bezel and the back cover to get into the inside of that. But we're going to be leaving that complete, and then we'll be taking apart most of the rest of the laptop. So all you're going to need is a small Phillips bit to start, and this is a 2.5. So just flip it over and remove the bottom case screws. Alright, once you have those bottom case screws out, sometimes these bottom cases can be held on pretty well with the plastic retainers on the outside. So they don't leave you a whole lot of crease or anything to get in there with a tool. So I found the best way is just to get some fingers in behind the back where there's a gap and just pry up. This bottom part right here is part of the bottom case. So if you can get your fingernails in there and just kind of roll your fingers to pry that up. And then it can also help to have a tool to go around the edge where you can kind of see it starting to pull up. And just keep some pressure with one hand. And if you have any trouble spots, you can work that in there to pop the little snap off. But it can feel like there's still a screw or something, but once you have the, 7 screws off the bottom case, that's it. This little thing right here in the middle is not a screw, so don't worry about that. So once you pop it all the way off, you can see the inside of the laptop. Alright, so doing a quick check. RAM is pretty easily accessible. It's right here on top, as is the SSD and the battery, hard drive, Wi-Fi card, and the fans. So all in all, it looks like it's pretty easy to work on and take apart. So to begin, we'll go ahead and disconnect and unscrew the battery. Okay, it's just 4 screws, and with this type of connector on the battery, just pull straight out, and if you get your fingernails right on that connector on either side, you can hopefully just wiggle it out of the connector. I don't know, it was kind of a pain for some reason. I don't know. It was laying kind of flat against the motherboard, but just keep working it back and forth and it should pop out of the connector. Alright, RAM stick, we'll just spread those little retainer bars, and once it pops up, remove it. And the SATA connector for the hard drive, it's just a flip up type connector. Pull the ribbon out, and then we'll remove the screws. This looks like a kind of a dummy hard drive, so but if you need to remove your hard drive, it's just the 4 screws, 2 on each side. Alright, so we'll go ahead and remove the Wi-Fi card. pull straight up all those antennas, and then remove the single screw for the card and pull straight out of the slot. And it'll be the same for the SSD drive. Looks like it's got some kind of bracket on top. And you just pull it straight out of the slot, and it appears to be an NVMe 2280 SSD. This is part of the Optane memory. Alright, so looking at the bottom here, we have some screws here for the vents. I'm going to go ahead and remove those. So it does look like, just because the Wi-Fi antennas are kind of intertwined with the fan here, I'm going to say it's probably not going to be the easiest to switch out the display on this, but we'll go ahead and pull these rear vent covers and see how easy it is to remove the LCD at this point, in case you're just wanting to, replace your screen. So with these vent covers, there's usually no screws up top, but it is kind of held on with the same kind of snaps that held the bottom case on. So if you're lucky, they'll pop right off. If not, then you'll have to kind of trace these around and find the seam to finish popping them off. There we go. So as you see at the top here, it's just got those plastic snap type connectors. So once you get in there a little bit, it should be able to pop them off. All right, we'll repeat for the other side. Okay, so the hinge system here on the screen looks pretty complicated. It's pretty much buried underneath the fan brackets here and the heatsink, it appears. So if you do need to replace your screen assembly, it's not going to be easy. So we'll continue on and remove these fan brackets. Alright, now we have those brackets removed. Our next task is going to be to remove the fan and heatsink assemblies. Now this one has a lot of wires kind of intertwined with the fan, and I see the DC jack connector right there. Doesn't look like there's a lot of movement potential, so I'm thinking we probably need to maybe untwine that from the fan. So we can get the fan out, or see if we can get that connector pushed all the way out, but definitely seems like there's not a whole lot of room. There we go. So once you kind of get that wire free from the fan, it gives you enough clearance there to remove it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and flip up on this little connector for the in-out board. Since we'll be disconnecting it anyways, and that way I can easily get to these antennas. And we're also going to need to disconnect the fans. It should be a little easier on the other side. The connector's a lot easier to get to. Just get your fingernails on those little tabs. And another flip up type connector. And then this one, you'll also want to try to get that cable free from the fan, which will give you a little bit more room to kind of wiggle it to get it out of the connector. There we go. Okay, so we'll go ahead and remove the screws that are holding the fan to the motherboard, and it looks like the 8 screws that are holding the heatsink in place. So once we get all those screws out, then we'll come back and remove the fans and heatsink. Alright, now that we have the screws out, we should mention it doesn't matter which order you take the screws out, but if you're going to reinstall it with new thermal paste, you want to tighten it in a crosshatch pattern, and they've kind of stamped the numbers on here in the order that you're supposed to tighten those down. Okay, so we'll just grab one end of the heatsink and just start wiggling gently. If it feels nice and loose, it means we got all the screws. And we can start freeing the heatsink. So the thermal paste, especially if it's older, can act like a really good adhesive. So as long as you've made sure you've got all the screws disconnected, you can do some serious wiggling to get that thing out. Looks like we got the Wi-Fi antenna a little bit holding on. Alright, and we'll just slowly flip it over. That's how you remove the fans and heatsink. It looks like they're in assembly. Okay, so at this point, looks like we are able to see some of the hinges underneath the, I guess that's a speaker. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect this. Okay, that's interesting. So you may actually have to pull the motherboard before you can get to the screen assembly. That's kind of what I'm seeing here. So we'll go ahead and just start removing the connectors from the motherboard. Especially with these little white ones, these can be kind of fragile, so you definitely want to kind of gently give it the wiggle back and forth to free it from that connector. Because these are really thin plastic and sometimes they can break on you. Alright, while we're over here, we'll go ahead and remove the last screw for the in-out board. And then we can remove that. And same for the DC jack. Once you get the bracket off, you should be able to just wiggle that out of there. Lots of little parts and pieces to this laptop. I would not really want to put this thing back together. Alright, so we'll give it a flip around, and just looks like one more for the touchpad over here, and a few more. Looks like for the keyboard. That's probably the keyboard backlight. Just a simple flip up type connectors. Alright, so we'll go ahead and pop out the last screws for the motherboard. Alright, I don't see any more screws. So I'll just give it a gentle wiggle and pay attention to any ports that might be poking through the palm rest so you don't pry up on those. And we will yeah, definitely the ports are kind of sticking through over on this side, so you're going to need to lean the motherboard up a little bit and then pull it out of the case there. Oh, looks like we have one little, it's probably for the power button. So watch out for that tiny little ribbon there. And that's why you got to be real gentle and slowly pull that motherboard free, just in case there's a little ribbon you didn't see. That's how you remove the motherboard. Alright, so we are down to the speakers, and now we can separate the palm rest from the display assembly. So while we're here, we'll just take a quick look at the keyboard. Not replaceable. As with most manufacturers nowadays, if the palm rest is plastic, they just melt the rivets through. They leave a little bit of a plastic piece sticking out. Put the plate on, and then they melt it in place. So if you want to replace your keyboard, you should buy it as an assembly with the palm rest. Touchpad does look replaceable, and those are just held on by some Phillips head screws. And we will go ahead and finish removing that power button. So I feel sorry for you if you need to fix your screen, because it's probably going to be quite the expensive repair, just because of how much stuff you have to take off to get to it. So, but the other stuff was relatively easy to get to. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and just remove two of the screen screws, or the hinge screws on either side. We'll leave one in place. And then we'll gently open the display. And then for the last two screws, you want to hold the display from underneath. Kind of give it the support it needs while you remove the last two screws. And then you can remove the display assembly. Alright, so all in all, it was a decently solidly constructed laptop, but they do use a lot of little bits and brackets and pieces, so definitely not the easiest to work on, but just track your progress, take a lot of pictures as you go along so you know how stuff is routed and put together. And it's doable with, you saw, just one small Phillips head screwdriver. So that's pretty much it. That's how you disassemble the HP 15 Pavilion gaming laptop. This is the 15-DK series 005nr. So if this video helped you or you found it informative, please like and subscribe. Thank you.